I haven't gotten all of it. I should text her.
Okay.
When we turn the room lights on, it will ends that rain. I go with that.
So that.
Players need to speak up.
Okay.
Hey. Start. Oh.
We'll pass them around. Take one. Or that is a set it. Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay.
Zoom meeting here.
There you go.
Trying to launch the Zoom meeting here. Our homepage needs its own.
Oh, I don't think I put it on the whole page. What's the ID?
Yeah, hang on. Seven.
What?
Okay, ready.
We got 873 for first three.
Okay.
3204 3642.
Thank you.
What else am I getting? Oh.
Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order at 8:33. And the next item on the agenda is to set the agenda.
I'd like to add an item to a new business. Called Abbey Farms. Oversizing cost.
ABBY. Any other changes or corrections? approve the agenda with Tom Waite's addition of item 8B, Abbey Farms.
So move, David.
Second, Peter.
There's a motion by Mary Anderson, support by Peter Hafner, and all those in favor.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Introduction of guests. The board has, do we want to introduce the board or just the guests that are here today?
We can do roll call, right? So maybe we should say our names. That's what.
Okay. Okay. Libby Heine Cogswell,
David Anderson.
Jim Escamilla.
Peter Hefner. John Crum. Tom Wheat.
Mark Kelly. Tim Hudson. James Baker.
in the city, Karen and Ellie. And then attending remotely, we have Rich Pearson, Joe Onholm from the city. That's as many as I can tell. Anybody I missed, if so, raise your hand in the participant column. Thank you. Next item is acceptance of the April 14th draft minutes. Those are in the packet. Any?
I would like to call out a change. Mr. Sorensen was present at the last meeting. Want to make sure that that got updated. And he also indicated to, for me to share to the group, he will be here. He's running a tad late due to other commitments this morning.
Okay. Any other changes or corrections? Would entertain a motion.
Escamilla move.
Support, David Anderson.
There's a motion by Jim Escamilla, support by David Anderson, to adopt the minutes as presented with the one correction to move Jeff Sorensen to members present. Changed by John Crum. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5 is public comment. Anyone here, or raise your hand in the participant column. Not seeing any, so we will proceed to unfinished business. And which of these items do we need to discuss today? I know we need D for certain, some of these are on.
So if I could just, B, I've sent my invoice to Wendy, but it said she's out till Monday. So I just sent it to James. But if you want, I can tell you what my number is.
I could send it and have copies printed if you want.
Whatever you want.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
While we're dealing with the other two.
Yes, we're dealing. We have copies of the other.
Yeah, so you want me to send an email to you, or you want me to send it to you?
You will email it to me, then I'll get it printed. Is there anything on item A?
No, work in progress.
Item B, and that's the,
That could probably be removed.
yeah, I
right?
think so.
Send it to you, Libby.
Okay, thank you. Item C, you don't have anything new today, or is that where we want to?
I think that's a work in progress. James gave us an update last time.
Just a note for the capital improvement program for the townships. We got out just yesterday, sort of maps, to start the conversation amongst the townships, their planners. I'll need to talk to you, John, about that a little bit, Senator Richland. So, because it is going through the Planning Act, there's gonna be some, it'll take a while. But that process is officially started. If it hasn't already been started among some of you guys, Oshawa's maybe already has some. So it started and it'll take a while to get those finished. I mean, they have till December 31st, 2023 to finish it. I think there's quite a generous timeline. Hopefully we can get them done earlier than that.
How many townships, you talking about all the townships?
Anybody who's gonna water, all the contractual townships.
Okay, item D.
Can we just go say E and do everything but that, or?
Okay, sure. The UCC alternate. There's no update on that today. And then the bylaws organization, we completed that. didn't we?
Yep, we can scratch that.
So that one. we just scratched. So then item D, the rate consultant RFQ. We'll take some discussion today.
Sure. I changed the original scoring that James provided and I sent it back to him and I made a copy if we choose to use it. But I simply pulled off where it had a preference for city organization and I added with what the items that were included in the RFQ that were of importance, just so that we all had an understanding of what we were asking for before we go about scoring.
Did you hand those scores that out?
I did, and it's probably
It's got great.
right here.
Yeah, I will also.
Also, James went, or someone in your organization went through and gave us a kind of a backbone, and I didn't realize it was legal when I was printing them down here in your office. But I think we can discern who it represents. I didn't know if you wanted to go through that, James, or.
I can, if there's questions on it. Overall, it just kind of takes the required information. So during this RFQ process, the city asks a number of questions related to number of employees, where the firm's headquartered, professional project team makeup looks like, and then to provide 5 records. So all that information is essentially consolidated and summarized on that backbone document that Mr. Hafner talked about. So we just did that to help facilitate those reviews. As you can it kind of cleans up a lot of the marketing, goes into a lot of these submittals, and just makes it a little bit of a one-stop shop reference. It doesn't replace an actual review of the proposal list.
I would suggest, Libby, that I email it to you and you pull it up on the screen and we can all walk through that. Just
Okay.
to, so that we're all on the same page. I just think it was helpful and I appreciate that you provided that, James.
Some things from.
Yeah, I think it was legal. I didn't realize it. I tried to just run it off on the copier. But I'm going to send that to Libby. If you wouldn't mind.
No, I don't mind. I have to sign into Adobe.
Yep.
It booted me.
Okay.
It was created as 11 by 17, so might have to
Yeah,
print it will probably be best represented.
I best it.
That's Excel, I didn't use the other one.
Oh, sorry about that. I do have a PDF too of it if you prefer.
This is okay, I've got it now.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go. We haven't had that many hard copies at our meeting. Files here. Okay. So this is up. On the screen. This is a.
Do you want me to walk through it?
That,
That's not the score sheet, it's the thing that I didn't print very well. So it's a summary of the qualifications of each firm and whether they, so we were looking for some specific items, and on the score sheet, maybe we can start this way. On the score sheet,
did you want me to put the score sheet up on the screen?
no,
The other one?
yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure I had it right.
Yeah, yeah. My thought is this just provides a nice summary of the information that we were requesting in the RFQ. And so for instance, we asked for their knowledge of accounting and financial concepts associated with development of water utility revenue requirements. And to some extent, that's displayed in the projects that they've completed. We also asked for their technical expertise in the costing and pricing of water utility services, showing their ability to identify, analyze, and solve complex rate-making problems. And I think that's displayed in the list of the projects they've completed. We asked for their experience, knowledge of Michigan law as it relates to utility rate method requirements for Michigan utilities. And again, I think if they've done work in Michigan, it shows some of that. And here are the clients that they're wanted to share with you. So for instance, in the case of Stantec, you can see, looks like they have 4 of 5 clients are Michigan. When you take a look at New Gen, not one Michigan client. And when we take a look at the third one, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, Raftellus, it looks like they have experience in Michigan, 4 of their 5 customers. Also, what about their experience, knowledge of water utility management, Michigan Public Act 399, et cetera, et cetera. We also asked to find out who was going to be on the team and where they were coming from, and this tells you. So for instance, the first one, it looks as though they have some form of people or an office in Ann Arbor. I'm not familiar with Stantec, And I don't know if anybody Googled them to see, you know, to what extent are they in Michigan? But this just gives you an idea of who's on the team, how much experience they have. So the first group, 110 hours. The second one, 40 or 110 years of experience. Average per individual, 22. The next one, 41 years of experience, average 10. And the last one, 83 years of experience, average 20 years. And there's their projects. I just thought it was worthy of, if you didn't study the proposals, it gives you an idea of how they're meeting the criteria that we're going to try to assess. At least it gives us a jumping off place. And on the score sheet itself, those scores, the components were provided by James, and I thought we should go through and say, is that how we should score? And if it is, that's fine. So James started us off without any of the wording, with the score sheet with the rating.
You have an extra score sheet.
I have, yes, there should be 7. And I'm guessing, James, can you give us some insight on this? That's pretty typically how you score. Is this like something you pulled off of you've done in the past?
Correct. So our purchasing department kind of guides us on this whole process. And that score sheet was provided by that purchasing department in terms of where the weightings are right now. That was their recommendations.
Okay.
And so we just kind of follow their guidance on that. And the content of that is you have in front of the computer that, as you know, that's all within the RFQ document. So there's nothing on that score sheet that we just invented, lately. So that was all presented to the firms already in the RFQ package.
Do you want to look at this one?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Thanks.
I would note the last item on here are the references. I don't know that we have that, correct?
So just some ideas on that. The city, we put together a team to evaluate this as well, just so that we would have the ability to provide the EPC with city recommendation if that's asked. And so we're still working through that process. But within our team, some of us have been reaching out to those references listed, and having phone conversations about the work product and other things of that nature. Some of our team members have also given the opinion that that package of information provided is the reference. So you could look at, say, Great Lakes Water Authority of Detroit and look at the project as a project narrative, and you can evaluate, does that relate to work in the city council?
Sure.
So there's, I guess, 2 perspectives on how you would approach the reference question.
Your team that has done that, can you share what your results are at this point? If you had a preference?
Yeah, so at this point, we're still tabulating our score sheets. We met together, reviewed all the proposals. We've been working independently to score, and we've got probably the majority of the score sheets in. Score sheets haven't been fully tabulated. We would expect to have that done within another week or so, and then at that point, we would give what our result recommendation would be. I would say, anecdotally looking through, I think there's been two pretty strong leaders in both Stantec and Reptelis that are, kind of highlighted by multiple members of staff for different highlights that work.
So not the volume.
Right. I would propose, this is just my perspective, and that we can do whatever you folks want to do, that we focus on those two firms at this point. If we choose to speak with them or what have you. And we appreciate the third one. My perspective is they didn't have the experience that the other two did, that James is suggesting were preferential. That's my perspective.
Oh, that was how I saw it too.
The other thing that I noted is there's another firm involved with them that they didn't really point out. There's a lot of people involved from a firm called Donahue.
Yeah.
It's in there. It's providing, I think, some of their background expertise that maybe they don't have themselves. So that is a little red flag for me. And they didn't mention it in their cover letter saying, hey, by the way, this is a joint venture or whatever you want to call it. But on the experience as well. Clearly, the other two are more experienced in this area.
So how would you like to proceed with? One thought I have is we need to do this as soon as possible to get the wheels moving. And I'd like to have the insight of the city, the staff, personally, this is me. And at that point, perhaps they will have a clear, this is the preferential, and if there weren't any objections, I may just go with their preference, versus doing it again ourselves. That's just my perspective. I think those two firms seem to be the forefront, and they both have experience in Michigan. I have a preference of people in Michigan, but that may just be one person here. I just don't know, and that may be worthy if anyone else is interested in having a local representative.
Well, it is covered in scoring.
Yes, no, I totally agree, but it might be worthy of me just looking on the web and saying, yeah, they got 4 people. Hey, great, maybe one of them will actually come here and talk to us. And there are planes too, I understand that. Or we can try to go through and score them if you like.
Are we looking at doing that right now, or?
If we do, I guess I wonder, you got this process already started that's going to occur.
Right.
So, I guess I'm comfortable with what you are suggesting, which is there are two applicants that seem to meet, at least initially, one of our kind of foundational requirements, which is Michigan experience, and seemingly each potentially could do the work. So do we want to run a separate whole process here? Or do we want to, look for a little input? I mean, I guess I'm not, unless someone tells me something I don't know, I'm not going to personally weigh in and say, no, it's got to be this. So.
I personally would rather see the city's recommendation, staff's recommendation, and if I don't agree with it, I'll just vote it down, or I'll give my vote.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I rely on their expertise.
And their fact that they've already talked to the references, I think that's a pretty important component. I'm not sure it's a 7 person. Yeah, it may be a 10 or 15.
So if we take that approach, then are we coming back in June 12th or 10th, whatever it is, to take formal action at our regular
Is that
meeting?
soon enough?
I believe so. The city team can have a recommendation for your next meeting, 6/12. that's well in line with our time.
Okay. And the scoring and the weighting that you're doing, the scoring is similar or the
Correct,
same as
we're
this?
using the exact same sheet that is confirmed.
So I support that process. We'll wait in June and we have, any member that wants to, dig in and be versed in this in line with the
Yeah, I would
recommendation,
like,
we can have a little more
if you can
discussion.
provide us with your recommendation, and also if you happen to talk to the references, if it's positive, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
not positive,
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, we can provide some comment on how we made those reference determinations and conversations.
And also, we had talked about an interview with these folks. Does this group want to have an interview, or are you thinking you, as part of your evaluation, at least when you maybe even make your preliminary selection, do you make a call to people, see if you can seem to deal with them personally or what have you? I'm guessing you can.
Yeah, we would certainly be open to that. I think if we were going to engage in the interview, we want to ensure that we had full support for that. So we wouldn't want to interview a firm and then come back and UPC didn't want to engage in the firm. So I think the interview would probably be, after June.
Post-bid interview.
Correct.
And at that point, you could come to us and say, this isn't going to work out. Or we would prefer to make a change.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At that point, it's kind of, you've already said.
Probably unlikely. These are very professional firms already.
You can ask for a replacement if the person is not working.
Yeah, it's something.
They have quite a bit of backfill on these guys.
That's when you open up your fees, right?
Correct. And we have not opened up fees.
Right, so then that's another decision point. Just for the record, I will not be here next month in Alaska.
What do you think, Tom, or?
I like that approach. I've already sort of dug into it a little bit. But I prefer to go with this. I'm going to probably go through it again and do my own scoring. My own purpose is at the next meeting and blend that in with the city's recommendation and make a decision. I'm comfortable with that. I don't see a huge need to interview because I think especially, you're dealing with people you don't know, and they're going to be on their best behavior during the interview. Where the rubber hits the road is when you're actually working with them, and it can be different situations. So,
And we could always say we want to replace them, or we'll select someone else if they're not working for the city.
this is, if it's a complete disaster, and I'm not suggesting that it would be, but there are termination clauses in the contract, right?
There are, and this presents a good discussion opportunity too. One of the things that we could do is that we could pre-qualify every one of these firms. And then we could move to the next step of actually recommending the firm we want to use through the process that we discussed, and then engage. And the benefit of pre-qualifying more than one, and it doesn't have to be three, or we talk about that, is that there is some difference of professional opinion. If our teams are unable to positively work together, we could really quickly pivot if we already have. We don't have to go through this whole process. So
I like
we
that.
could go to the number two if the whatever dynamics of the relationship with number one aren't working out.
I like that idea.
Do we need to take any action at this point?
I don't think so, but I would like to summarize. So we're going to, city's going to pre-qualify, work to pre-qualify.
Yeah, we could pre-qual all in your direction. I guess if there's some discussion or decision on which ones you want to see pre-qualified.
Should we make that decision at the next meeting?
Yeah, we can do that, yeah. And then also a determination on which firm you want us to engage with the next step of getting actual proposals to be approved by the city and that formal one.
So is the summary that we would direct the city to assess and provide us with their assessment of the two firms that we have discussed, that's Stantec and Tellus, and bring us an assessment of the qualifications of these firms before the next meeting, so we can take action at that point? Because at that point, we could say, yes, these are both qualified, or we could say they're both qualified, we would refer you and these folks for the rate calculated. But they would both be in place possibly, or just one if you find one is preferential. Or not.
So I get that, equally qualified. That, I was kind of liking the idea that we get a recommendation for to select one of these firms at our next meeting, and we be done with that.
Am I allowed to interject? It's Rich. Sorry. The water agreement says they shall interview.
Rich. Sorry,
So-
Rich.
I think
He's just directing our attention to the water agreement and says what we should do, so I'll pull it up.
But, well,
Okay.
we're walking out, trying to pick words wisely.
Yeah.
Walking into a new area, right? The goal and objective out of the contract is for utility policy committee to ensure that the actions that the city take are appropriate. We're in a position right now where we don't have a concern with actions being taken by the city. We're trying to show support that you don't want to reinvent a wheel. You don't want to start some new process. Though I know what the contract says, that we're allowed to interview at this point. Where's the merit in interviewing if we don't know? Why not follow the recommendation of the city? Let the process run its course. And at that point, we have the checks and balances within the contract that says, okay, let's come back. The information that James Baker provided, an opportunity to pre-qualify more than one, puts us in a position where, hey, if things don't go good with firm A, firm B can quickly step in. It's an even transition. I don't think we want to create a whole new policy the very first time we sit at the table with a rate consultant with one guy with some experience and 6 other green people sitting here. For the most part, let's use the professionals that are in position, allow them to start directing us. Let's just provide recommendation, not direct us, and allow us to determine if there's some change in direction that's needed. I think the process in place at this point isn't broken, or has it failed?
I understand exactly what you're saying, and appreciate that. I'll read you what it says. So it says, candidates shall be vetted and interviewed by a selection committee made up of 3 city-appointed members of the utility policy committee or their alternates. Each member of the selection committee shall rate each candidate, et cetera, based on their experience. The city will contract with the candidate with the highest total by this selection committee. Well, we currently have 7 people looking at this, but I think the city can vet these organizations through their review process. And we can select 3 people here to vote for who we want to choose at the next meeting. And I think that addresses what this says.
So wait,
For the most part.
read that again. So
Well,
I understand that 3 people on a committee, but typically that would still come to the full board for final.
No, Peters, it says the committee shall be 3 people from the city side and 4 people from the township side.
Okay, I might have
Which
an
is
old
basically
version.
the UPC.
Okay. So if this, we can use the city to vet these firms and see what their thoughts are, and then we can rate them and do what we need to do.
So I'm trying to understand the steps. So what needs to happen to hire? So we've got, right now we've got the RFQs, we've got the qualifications, is that correct? So we're going to pre-qualify based on those qualifications, and then the city's going to do.
That's good.
So
I'm trying to understand the
Yeah.
specific steps that we're talking here.
So the pre-qualification process might be somewhat nuanced to agencies that don't utilize that. And I give some background on commonly within, say, water, wastewater. We have, in any given year, you folks know where capital planning is like, it's pretty onerous, pretty large. And so what we do is we select through a process similar to this, engineering firms that we feel could work with the city that have the qualifications, experience, knowledge, and expertise. And so then we create a list of pre-qualified engineering firms. And then once that firm's pre-qualified, the next step to get them to actually do work is really just a phone call and a quick proposal. And so it's, Mr. Weed, we're trying to move off there, a pre-qualified firm. There's a lot of work with the firm and with the city that gets them to be kind of like on that list. Once you're on that list, to go and do work is a phone call. Hey, we want you to do this work. And then a proposal comes in and says, okay, the work you define for this scope is going to be this price, and then we execute the professional service. So that we're providing that as kind of just, it's not outlined within the master agreement. The master agreement doesn't really focus on that. It's just something that the city has, to make things easier if you need more than one contractor consultant for a project.
So here with this group and fulfilling our role, we're looking at the June meeting to have this list of recommended pre-qualified firms. Is that correct? Along with a recommendation of which one, and then this committee in June will vote on which firm. Is that correct?
To support the recommendation.
We'll consider the
Or
recommendation.
not, yeah, and we
Yeah,
can make our assessment at that time. I'm gonna look at the proposals.
Yeah.
I really want their insight before I go further. It's hard for me to discern at this point. So I want their assessment, and then at that point, it says we're supposed to assess them based on a scale. Well, we could agree with the way it's been assessed and move on, perhaps, or we can do whatever.
So we'll do that in June, and then after that point, there's a recommendation or a vote here, and then the next steps, the proposals and the phone calls is all just in the city's hands. Is that correct?
Correct. Our understanding, once we receive direction from UBC that UBC would like us to select from X, Y, or Z, we'll then make that happen so that the requested firm is then under contract.
Is there a duration to this?
Yeah,
Is it 3 years?
It's multiple years in the contract with the ability to.
So what is it?
I think it's 2.
I think it's 2 years, and then there's
With 2 years, or I think you can.
and then 2 extensions. If UBC is satisfactory with the work, they can extend.
Okay.
And then moving forward, so that we're not, it would seem a little odd to me to meet this consultant in November, whenever the recommendation is made. Is there like a kickoff or something at this meeting in July or August?
In the contract, I believe it says that we are to interact with this individual, I think, work.
Okay,
So perhaps at the next meeting, we maybe do a Zoom with them
okay,
and meet them.
okay.
And we also need to determine, do we need a rate calculation? Just theoretically, do we need someone to tell us what the rate needs to be? Because perhaps as we move forward, we might find that many of the projects were grant funded. That was the big reason to increase the rates, and if that's the case, maybe we could get away with waiting one, or maybe we direct them to proceed, but that's what we're to do.
So just for a point of order, the contract does say the candidates shall be vetted and interviewed by the selection committee, which would be us. So I don't know, just, that's in the contract.
Technically, we are the selection committee,
Yeah.
not Jim's staff. Okay.
Yeah, because it's 4 members by the city, so it's us. And we can make that decision at the next meeting. I don't think we need to make that now. I think the idea is, in my opinion, the idea is if you got 2 people who are neck and neck, you want to have to sit down and talk with them. But if there's a third choice, maybe not necessary. But that would be part of our discussion.
Back to some particular questions. So when in the process would an interview occur?
So the interview is a selection interview. So it's impactful to your decision making. That would have to.
So it'd be pre-recommendation that you're interviewing. So do you contemplate that that will occur?
Correct. So that could occur following your June 9th meeting. Say we recommend firm X to have an interview, and that would have to. That's going to be a public interview.
Could this committee authorize a member or two to represent this committee and participate?
I don't see why we couldn't, do you?
What are our bylaws? I guess we can do whatever we want. As long as it.
You're talking about participating in an interview between now and the June meeting?
Yeah, like assign someone that responsibility.
I'm just, again, the point of order is, does it say?
I get that. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it work.
Right. And it doesn't make sense to do that. So, sorry.
The question at hand is, is there a reason at this point to interview?
I don't know. I haven't dug that far into it yet.
Yeah. The contract, right?
So I have one suggestion. We've been using video interviews now and putting them on OneDrive. And then could the city, as part of this vetting for these 2 firms, do a 30-minute or whatever interview, put it on OneDrive, and then this group can look at those ahead of the June meeting?
And we can do that.
Should you do that, I would ask them maybe just, how did you show this, so that they have something to us. You know what I mean?
When you do your interviews, you have a sort of, you do the same questions right down the line for each?
We would. And we've had a few contracts within the last year or 2 where we've utilized an interview process to further our decision. So, we would reference that. We have written questions. We would stick to that. The questions. Perhaps a question for UBC membership would be, UBC want to appoint or select a member or members to participate in that with the city. Obviously, we report it, present it to you, but whether you want or did engage in that as well.
I don't need that.
I like Libby's idea. If they, it could be, you don't necessarily need to bring them here to Kalamazoo, but record it as long long as the interviews are consistent with one another. Obviously, their opening statements are going to be different.
And closing.
Yeah, but at least the questions that are being asked are.
Sure. And you might say this interview will be 20 minutes long. So
Yeah.
you don't end up on a 2-hour deal.
Jim, I didn't hear your comment.
Closing, you said opening and closing will be different.
Yeah.
They get a free for all,
Okay,
show their personality.
okay. So ones we just did for staff position, I mean, we had 5 questions and then at the end, opportunity for them to ask questions. And it is working really well. We should take this time.
I like that idea.
I think that covers everything in paragraph 7.2A.
Yeah.
That way, if there's anybody down the line, not necessarily us, whatever, John Q. Public says you didn't follow your contract. Not that, who knows?
I mean, this is up to the city, but we just had, our HR person do the interviews, post them. So I don't know that you have to have a whole group there.
So we would not include HR in this process. This would be our purchasing and,
Yep.
this is our management services group, but we would fully include them with it. And, not to say that we can't borrow some, the best management practices that have been identified in HR.
I would say in the next week or so, if anybody here on this board has any questions they want to be asked at that interview, to submit those to James. Because the interviews probably won't happen for at least a week.
Just have a quick question about it. Were we surprised of only getting 3 responses?
No, I think we were, I think that was very fair, and positive. We did receive a lot of responses from firms that are just too busy. One thing to consider that this word is a real niche, and it kind of encompasses the area between engineering and finance and accounting worlds. I think the message that we're getting from getting the 3 is that the 3 that responded want to do it. And they're being very professional and honest about their workloads as firms, and do they have the capacity to take out a new client and to engage them. So I think that given the relatively small amount that it speaks to their professionalism and their true ability to take us on. They're not just throwing numbers at the wall, so to speak, to get your clients. They're going to take it serious.
Yep, and just so we're clear, so the interviews then would be available to at least the UPC members ahead of the next meeting, so we can do them, have the hard copies of the proposals and the interview when they come to discuss it. Okay, thank you. Revenue expense report. We do have today the invoices from Simon Newhoff, from Tom, Peter, and Jim.
I do want to point out on our billing, and I'd be happy to revise this, is we talked about the professionals and our rates, and it was intended, I guess, just for me, Peter or Jim, but I did have some backup work done in the office, maybe $300 or so. And I'd be happy to revise that, truncate that, not have that appear anymore, just so that the bylaws are clear. We don't have to spend another 6 months negotiating that. And then I would just, if I need that, because once in a while I need some backup information. It's easier for me to have Penny do it. And then just from here on out, if I need that, we'll just do that and not charge. So I'll leave that up to the EPC. But I just, so in case you notice that.
I appreciate you saying that, because when I looked at that, it made me think, okay, are we hiring a person or a firm in this seat, and how does that work out? So, I don't know what the answer to that is, but.
I mean,
I thought it was technically his person.
what's that?
I thought technically it was a person.
Yeah. And moving forward, I'll just make sure that that doesn't get built. And it's a tiny part of it. So,
Yeah.
But I would be happy to revise this and resend it. So if you want, if the motion is to pay for my time, I think it's like $324 of the total. So I can make that revision and resend it to Wendy, or send it to PO. Or if you want to make that part of your motion, that probably be most appropriate.
Is there any questions on these invoices?
I have a question here. So I know it's hard to predict, but do we need to have any sense of budget on this? You know, we got what, 6 months of billing or whatever it is here, so we're starting to get a sense of what it might look like. Do we need to think about that at all? I mean, are we kind of looking ahead this year, or is that? Is this all within the realm of acceptability? We don't need to think about what that.
Some of it is, I think this is within the realm, but I'm just thinking, trying to think out loud, like we're asking to facilitate the I think, as part of this committee, to facilitate that, the planning of water sewer projects across all. I think we've asked you to do that, Tom, or is that part of your normal engineering for these other organizations?
I have not done anything.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I've been asked to do separately is the connection issue.
Okay. And I'm just wondering how substantial it is.
So in general, we have 2 hours, kind of like in this meeting.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm gonna have 1 to 3 hours preparing for it. And unless you could assign me to something else. When we were starting out, I had more reading to do. But I'm down to like 4 hours a month.
Yeah, this is more like 10 months of billings.
Yeah, back in July or whatever.
So it looks like everybody's sort of approaching it the same. You got to drive further, but.
Yeah.
Right.
And I looked at the contract and put together a summary, and I looked at the RFP, and I came down to the city. You know what I mean? So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I do think this year and next year, there will be more time.
If we get to quarterly, that would
Yeah.
substantially change things.
It's the start of it.
So our max is 25,000 each per year. And it looks like we're gonna be 10 to 12.
Yeah.
For first year, which I think
Yes.
is, yeah.
And that's normal operations, and I believe our bylaws say unless you ask me to go do something special.
Yeah.
we'll talk about that scope.
And I don't think we're done with those startups.
Right.
They're gonna take more time.
Well,
Peter's point of getting the quarterly meetings, Mr. Reed's got 10 months worth of time invested before getting return paid back for it. I'm hoping we can at least quarterly get invoices from them and approved going forward, so that this firm's now holding 10 months, or right, Peter's firm holding 8 months of their time invested. The minimum quarterly as well to get them paid a little more efficiently.
Well, we bill monthly, so there'll be a monthly bill. And as long as we're meeting monthly, we'll
Yeah, at that point.
But once we go to court, I don't have any problem. But 10 months gets a little long.
Yes.
So it's,
Yes, we're gonna do these one at a time, right?
Yeah, correct.
oh, okay.
Because gentlemen are gonna.
Good
People can
reminder,
abstain,
yes.
We don't have,
Okay.
so I was gonna make a motion to approve then Trina Newhoff invoice less the other charges.
324.
Yes. For payment. So that's.
I
my
would
motion.
second that motion. Peter?
David?
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes,
Just want to
five,
make sure we're catching the abstentions so that got all that.
5 to 0, 0 and 1 abstention. Okay.
Well, I guess it's gonna fall to the two of us here. So.
I'll make the motion to accept the invoice for professional services for Mr. Escamilla for $6,840.
Second. Peter?
John in motion.
There's a motion and support. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5 to 0 and 1 abstention. Mr. Escamilla.
Then I move the payment of the billing from Bradeville, Hefner, LLC, the amount of 9789.13.
I'll support that.
Motion, David, support, John. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye. Abstain? Hefner?
Motion passes 5 to 0 and 1 abstention. 1 absent and 1 abstention. John said the check is in the mail. Oh, I did that under the revenue expenses.
Right. That's okay.
It's okay.
I have
I was-
more under the revenue expense report.
Okay,
I would just request that staff provide us with the first quarter of the year.
Okay.
Please. Hefner?
And Peter, you also have an outstanding request for non-covenants.
Yes, sir.
That we did not. For the bond covenants. And Q1.
Yes. Thank you.
anything else on the revenue expense? Okay. We did A, professional services invoices, then we're on to B, Abbey Farms. I believe this company was.
Hand this out. This has to do with some oversizing costs, contributions from the system. So let me just explain the background here. This is Abbey Farms in Pavilion Township, this map. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see a Sprinkle Road. And then Ann Avenue is at the top, running in an east-west location. Abbey Farms is on Millam Avenue or O Avenue Pavilion. The line here, that's the Portage Pavilion line. So they're right at the on Millam Avenue. There's a big commercial complex in the city of Portage to the southwest. So as long as everybody understands that, Peter, you probably don't know as well, but
You saying O?
O is no.
Yep,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So if you go to the west, you run into the airport. It doesn't go through. After the big S curve of Sprinkle Road. The township did approach Portage initially to see if they would serve water, because there is water in Portage right there, right at the intersection, or right at the corner of where Pavilion and Portage meet. Carve out a section of that to have a franchise with the city of Portage. City of Portage declined. It is within the franchise area of the city of Kalamazoo, so there would have had to be some changes there, but it's just because of the proximity of the water, that question was asked. And so the developer is choosing to make this extension from the city of Kalamazoo system. It is a large extension, and it's a loop system, so they're tying into Ann Avenue, coming down the railroad track, coming down their east boundary to serve their property, and then back up through what will be for the developer, commercial industrial development. That's the sort of the curvy part of it as it goes out back towards Sprinkle Road. So this is the first part of their development. This is the old foundation property in Pavilion. I don't know if anybody's aware of that, but that's the old Kalamazoo Foundation property. So the development itself can be sustained with an 8-inch pipe. But the design from the city, and I've let James know we're going to be talking about this, so just make sure that I'm not misunderstanding something, but the city is saying, well, we need 12-inch because this is a big extension. There's going to be further growth in the area eventually. Peter?
Can you just explain what's at the bottom here? I mean, I see there's like a drawing of building.
Oh, that's like 700 unit apartment complex. So,
and that's new.
that's what this is being.
Yep,
They're
okay.
building that,
Got it.
and that's what this water main extension is going to be serving that. So that's the developers driving this. So the policy has been that if a developer-driven project requires an oversizing to a 12-inch or larger pipe from an 8-inch, that the city pays for that additional cost for materials. The labor costs, everything else is pretty much in line. They're still digging a 5-foot trench. But in normal situations, it's a housing development where maybe 1,000 feet of pipe, 500 feet of pipe is asked to be oversized. So the impact to the budget is, there is an impact, but it's something that they can handle, they deal with, and they probably anticipate in the budgetary process. During this year, we're going to have X number of these that come in. We don't know when they're going to come in, but they're going to come in. The issue here is, from a budgetary standpoint, is there's 13,000 feet of this.
Say it's about 2 miles.
So the budgetary impact and the number that the developer has indicated, and I have not vetted this, I've not looked and seen the number is about almost $500,000. When they asked in the township on the sewer side, when they asked for oversizing the sanitary sewer, we asked for some additional leads and oversizing the sanitary sewer for the same purposes. The number they asked for 105, and I think we ended up at we're still negotiating that we're about 95, so it's in the ballpark. So the impact is going to be $500,000, maybe it's a little less, but still a big number. Also, because of the timing of this, this is not included in the township's public water master utility plan that is envisioned to be then put into the capital improvement plan that then could be paid for by us. So and I would envision, well, again, that speaks to the whole master utility plan. Because they probably didn't understand that this could have happened. So this is one of those where the developer comes in, something happens. We have to do. In the contract, it says, the city is required by sound engineering practice will increase the size capacity of other townships, distribution facilities, transmission facilities. So that speaking to this, making things bigger for good engineering practices, excuse me, and that the cost of this expansion for the benefit of all customers of the public water supply system shall be is either through direct contribution of infrastructure or assessment of costs of the infrastructure or system connection fee or assessment surcharge on water rates or any combination. So when we're talking about expansion of the system, and that's sort of the work we're working on in terms of the water connection fees, it's trying to figure out how that's going to work in a normal order of business. So, extending a developer building a housing project, extending some water in a neighborhood that doesn't have water, city closing a loop because it makes sense to close a loop. Those we're still working on that, and that's sort of complex, and that's why it's taking some time. This is popping its head up now, and there's the developer needs to have. They're moving forward with the project, but they are asking for the contribution from the system for the oversize. So
And they were going to pay for the 8-inch on their own.
yeah, and they knew that, and they were aware of that sort of long-standing policy of the city pays for outside.
But this is outside of our district, right?
No, this is within Pavilion Township. Pavilion Township is within the contract. So, and I've been talking to city staff about this over the past month or so. Steve and I finally did have a chance to talk yesterday. I asked him to talk to you. James, if you have any comments, I would welcome them.
Yeah, I would just, broadly speaking, this is in line with engineering and technical recommendations. Tenets to this are long reaching, all the way back to the 60s, where, the city has a long demonstrated process of supporting upsizing, and really upsizing is fundamental to our entire growth of our system. It's how we got the system today. And it is fundamentally how we grow the system. It's what you have in front of you here, at the bottom rectangle is the developed area. And with properly sized water main, there is the hope that it's going to get infill developed. It's going to get developed all the way. We have the right size water main up front. It will support that both from fire flow perspective as well as the drinking water perspective. Correct. We did that in the
Main Street, your developer rented out all the way to D Avenue, west end D, and almost to the Elm line at 12th Street, and that was the order that was that water main. We have 80 acres now development property that's for sale off that main, now being oversized for work. So
The only, I think, perhaps challenge in front of us immediately is that we don't have a line item in our CIP fund that can accommodate $500,000 upsizing. And as you're aware, CIP has rate impacts. So, we can't go back to the office tomorrow and just say, hey, let's put 500,000 in CIP. That won't come into CIP until 2023. And, that would be part of our overall CIP plan that would come to UBC that, all of CIP has raised tax. And then that would, essentially forward. So, assuming that it's placed in the CIP, and we move through that, all the iterations of raising tax accounts, that won't be the only thing in CIP. The next, the final steps really to make this happen would be we would execute an agreement with the developer, and then ultimately that would come back to city commission, recognizing an agreement that we would execute with the developer, UBC support, and whether or not that's CIP. So the first step in all of this is UBC.
First step is UBC.
First step is UBC.
And again, the only reason we're bringing this to the UBC right now is because it is so big. James, if it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but if this was, if it was a developer in Texas Township running 1,000 feet, would this come to the UBC? I guess it would, because.
Well, that's a great point. I think probably, we've got some opportunities here to create perhaps some blanket policy that, that recognizes upsizing, that the UBC could support, that, could just kind of be operated in the background so that you don't have to hear about, every
$10,000.
Yeah, well, every 300 foot pipe section township is going to get honors forward. But I think there needs to be established policy so that we can ensure that it's happening in every township, every development, in every location, and then some set template, 2 or 3 party agreements that we can take right to the developer and say, yep, this is do it 6 times a year. Now it's your turn. This is what we do.
And part of the thought process on the connection fee part of it was to set up sort of 2 or 3 buckets or 2 or 3 situations that are just normal and typical, and we approve and say, this is going to be the policy for these things, because it happens all the time. And we don't necessarily approve it, but maybe we get a report on it, right? But the unusual ones would come to us, and this is clearly an unusual one. So I guess with what we're hearing is support from the city that this does fall into the policy for oversight, but that the assistance or the financial assistance through the rates would have to be in some sort of separate agreement that would solve your budget issue. Is that what I'm hearing?
Essentially, we would be unable to meet the $500 contribution until 2023, supportive of UPC, both in rates and in capital.
I have a question. So are we just talking pipe? We're going to buy the pipe or the upsized pipe, but the labor is completely bared by the developer.
Correct.
There's no added cost because of going from 8 to 12 in the labor. I know there is, but we are only paying for the material.
Yeah. So essentially, what we require is a 2-piece bid tab, a bid and an alternate, and so the developer would have to demonstrate through the bid process that here's all of our pay item costs for 8-inch, and then here's all of our pay item costs for 12-inch, and that difference is what we're going to pay.
So so then I have, my follow-up question was, in the last meeting, we talked about we were gonna buy a bunch of pipe.
That's for the city. The city's engaging in that process. That's separate.
But it wouldn't come from that stock.
We don't provide pipe.
Okay, all right. All right. We'll let them worry about getting their own material, then, right? Yeah. Okay.
So if they've got their own pipe, good for them.
Maybe that's for their shortage. It's got all stacked in the warehouse somewhere.
Now with upsizing of 8-inch to 12-inch pipe, there may be a tiny bit of labor that, you know.
Right.
8 volts versus 6, but does that slow your production down? I think that's why we have not engaged the developer on the number that they gave us. Just because this conversation had to happen first. The second conversation is to get into a point where the city agrees with, and I help you with that, agrees with that number. What is really the upsize number?
So they gave us a number and we're not happy with it, or they didn't give
I
us a
haven't
number?
even dug into it,
Okay,
just because
all right, but has there already been an 8-inch number?
they just like, they gave an oversized price of $486,943.
I don't have that.
No, you don't have that.
So $500,000 away, yep. Okay.
So
For those who are attending virtually, I took a quick photo and threw this up, and just north is to the right on the screen.
So, based on sort of what consensus I'm hearing from silence more than anything else.
Well, a few questions. Okay. Portage had an opportunity to participate, chose not to.
Yes.
That's what I was
Reason for
asking.
that?
The reason that they gave is they would prefer them to develop the apartments within the city limits of Portage.
Okay. Sure, fair enough. I mean, way back in the, just random thoughts and open, way back in the olden days of expanding water systems, and there was discussion about what do you get for that? Is this benefit? Do we annex something? All that conversation, which really hasn't occurred to a great extent, at least for the last many decades in Kalamazoo. It's been more of a, yeah, we'll extend it out, we're sharing the system, we're not requiring some commitment. Like, that's why I wondered what Portage just said. Hey, you want something from us? What do we get out of it? So that is interesting, because that does put this in this space of like thinking regionally, not just in our own best interest. Then I think about rates, things like that. Well, everyone's going to pay for this extension, whether you're in Ashtamo or whether you're living, on the east side of the city of Kalamazoo. So a person could ask, what's in it for me? I'm paying for it. And I guess, you run something like this down. At some point, I guess you could say, if there's a lot of development there, maybe that will, that development in essence will cover the cost of this expansion and those rates there. But that's prospective. That's not here. That's maybe over the next decade or something. Then the other thought is, yeah, but we're a region. We need housing. Whether you're in Pavilion Township or, just a few hundred feet down the road in Portage, Portage people can live here. We need housing and development that might provide jobs. That's all good. That's good for the region. So I'm just trying to think about all those things together. Then one other little side piece. Is your firm doing like the engineering for the developer on this?
We represent the township. We're working with the township on it.
So okay. So that's just one thing I think, if there's a situation, because I realized all of this work here, if you were, say, working on this, or getting paid to do this, I think you're just going to have to be very careful about what am I representing here? Because access to this board could be worth well more than what we're paying to a particular developer. If you're working on a project and you're having access here, they can come here and, suggest the an action, so there's all that stuff that could come up too.
Believe me, if we were working on this, I would have let you know
Yeah,
and maybe approached it differently, just so that conflict is not very apparent or not.
right. I appreciate that. I mean, it's evident you know more about it, so I knew some way or another you know about that.
What's the project timeline?
I do not know. I know that I was out there because we're doing a sewer thing for the city of Portage, and there was equipment out there.
So this is interesting. This is a huge project, 700
Yes.
units. I mean, I'm glad to see housing
Yes.
proposals. So the UPC role, the hat that we're wearing, is how costs are recouped. I think we're hearing that since 1960s,
It's
the
a,
oversizing has been recouped through the system. So I'm not hearing a proposal to change that, but is that what we're looking at today?
I guess there's a couple aspects of it, just theoretically, and correct me, just because I'm not a master of the contract, but the developer is paying for the 8-inch that supplies his development. And the city's saying, well, it's really best practice to put in 12 because we want to provide water to the next guy that comes down the line, which I totally get. And if that's just the best practice, that's the way it is. I guess I look at it too, and I say, does the developer own all the land?
Developer owns pretty much everything here.
Right.
Who
So
is the developer?
Huh?
ABB? Who is the developer?
West Wind.
my thought is they're the ones that need the quote, right?
Well, no,
But
because
because then it would
that
come out.
was my first question. Do they need it for themselves?
Okay.
And the models that were run, they do not need it for themselves. They could supply what they need for themselves.
For this portion.
And the whole,
So then
when
that's
they- when they-
down the road,
Yeah.
connection fees.
they
which
could
is
do the whole
another-
thing? He said they can do the whole.
Oh, they
thing.
could do the whole thing with it. Oh, and so then the water would be huge, James, with 12-inch. And the thought would be maybe next it goes this direction, kind of thing.
Correct. You could.
I'm just pointing to the right.
It could go, kind of wherever the next puzzle piece fits in. The railroad, may have some constraints, but, you can go across railroad tracks.
Okay.
There's been a long known commercial development pressure, if you will, along NAP, on that southern, kind of boundary of NAP that is pretty well familiar.
So pipe sizing is a combination of domestic flow, how much people are using every day, constantly, fire flow. So in this case, the domestic flow in this whole area, and you have a fire, could be handled by 8-inch. But if it grows, then that domestic flow
Outside,
doubles
if it goes down the road the other direction.
so you have more people using the water, and then you have a fire. It dropped, the 8-inch would drop below what you, so that's why the 12-inch.
Yeah. So what are so you're saying we can't put this, you can't put it in your CIP until next year. I'm guessing if they're digging, they're gonna want to do this very soon. I would think. I'm not an engineer or a contractor. What do you say? That put an 8-inch pipe in the ground because we can't pay for it? Or
No, because it's been.
so then something has to occur so that you can, or I don't know, but I'm just thinking out loud. If you say that you're gonna put one in, but wait till next year, maybe that's okay, but
It's
maybe
been
not.
permitted as a 12-inch, so they have to, if they're gonna build it, they're putting it as a 12-inch. They can't put it in as 8-inch. So they've made some commitments. They've made some business decisions to move forward at this point without an agreement.
Mhm.
So they have some risk, but they did that based on precedent, on past practices.
Could we offer to help them with next year's budget?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think James was talking about, is talking with them, putting an agreement together, say, yeah,
Okay.
we'll pay for this, but it's gonna be next year.
So back to the UPC role, our role is cost recovery.
Yeah. So maybe, do you want to
And
read
how do
what?
we,
Well, see, it actually says in here, we can recoup the cost either through contribution of the capital, which is actually what we're doing.
for the 8-inch,
That's exactly right. So
Yes.
there is no, we only get to say how to recoup the costs if there are costs, but there aren't.
but the rest
This is the cost of a best practice.
So,
Just put an 8-inch in and we won't have to worry about it. It's theoretically kind of what the contracts.
so that additional 4-inch upsizing
Yes.
is not, why is that not a consideration for this? It's not a consideration for this group of cost recovery?
Well, because it's actually not a cost of the development, it's a cost of what the city chooses to do.
no,
Right?
unless I misunderstand. So we are saying, we're asking for the direct contribution, which is the 8-inch portion.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then the contract, it says in the last sentence, is otherwise, the cost of expanding the distribution facilities, blah, 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 blah. Which is not recaptured through direct contribution, all these other things, shall be added to the rate base. That's what this is.
Ah,
Right. Saying,
oh, okay.
yeah, so it's saying if we, UBC, say there's not another way, direct contribution, assessments, assessment district, connection fees, is that there's not another way to pay for that, then
Well, if, yeah,
it goes through the rates.
and it's up to the UPC to say whether it gets recouped, regardless.
So I'm very clear on the 8-inch part of it. I'm not as clear on the upside. Whether what you just read
Yep.
is saying
Yes.
the only option is through the rates. Is that what it's saying?
In my opinion, yes.
I agree. My thought is you can just say put an 8-inch in. It's up to the city if they want to put in 12. Right?
Yes, but the city also holds WSSN. They're the operators of the system.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying, I'm just saying if they, but I guess that's the reason that it's not up to us to say,
Okay.
They need to pay more because they don't need a 12. They need an 8, and that's what they're paying for.
Well, there is a technicality that they do need the 12-inch because it was permitted as a 12-inch expansion, not an 8-inch. So they can't just put in 8. It has to be 12. So what's at hand is the upsize cost.
So they need an 8-inch. The system needs a 12-inch. So the system's gonna pay for that upsize.
So the system pays for it, and then later this year, we may have discussion about that development that happens to the east, or this commercial or west, wherever this is located, and they want to connect to water. That's where this connection fee discussion is going to play in. To me,
Well, I don't know that, that's outside of the contract. Because
Right.
if the next developer just says, I'll stick my straw into that pipe and pay for my straw, my pipe, and I need 8-inch into my development, that's what they're gonna have to pay for. There's no cost other than.
Yeah, and that's the direct contribution. So they're expanding it for their own purposes, and they're paying for 100% of that. If it's 8-inch.
So yeah, it's
Right,
kind of a
right,
catch,
right.
it's a kind of a
Right,
catch
okay.
22. You're saying it's wise to put in a 12, but they theoretically, I guess engineering wise, they only need an 8. But, so the next guy is next door,
So
it makes sense to
that-
do it now.
that 4-inch upsize, the whole system paid for. we
That's
paid
right.
for.
That's right.
So does this new connector have to contribute? And I think that's a future discussion.
But yeah, so in the wording, I think it says whenever if it's not a cost to the system, then we really don't have a say.
Yeah.
It's only when there's a cost to the system. Let's say you want to put all pipes across every street in the township here. We could say that should be recouped through an assessment. But if there's not actually a cost to the system, I guess that's how do you define that? Because there's a $500,000 cost to the system.
I appreciate you brought this huge project to us so we can be aware of it and understand it.
And I understand what you're saying is you're saying they got a 12, I just don't know because I'm not in your businesses. Could they just go in and say, we need an aid? So would they not get a permit?
They would not.
They wouldn't.
Because the permitting agency is the city of Kalamazoo.
Okay.
The city of Kalamazoo would not permit an undersized of the system that they're responsible for.
To serve the next guy.
To serve, yeah, I mean, it's,
I understand. I just want a logic to. So I guess then is it a cost of the,
So, question on our policy, which we haven't nailed down yet, this idea of expansion and maybe some things are just automatically going to be reported to us, some things come to us, what does that look like, which we're in the process of working on, right? So this is obviously going to be something that's going to fall at that upper end of those categories. Can we create special cost reimbursement models in that it doesn't always translate to cost of the system, where you put it at 12, but then, okay, someone in this set of tracks or this other developer wants to hook up, they're going to put their own pipe in, but to connect to our 12, there's a larger assessment or cost that helps pay for the original installation of the 12. I mean, just talking about scale and that kind of thing. Are there other models that make sense to recapture that extra cost now?
yes. And so I'll couch that in terms of sanitary sewer. Because I work with the townships. Sanitary sewer, 8 inches okay, but the township says, hey, we need to be able to serve this whole other area here. We need to go to 12 or 15 inch. That's not a good. That's why this my work on the water connection extensions is taking a while.
6A, yes, that's in process.
there
That's
are-
what we're talking about.
But there are payback. There's sometimes payback agreements to developers. If the developer runs from A to B and then services them, and then people along that line connect, they get some. They can sometimes get portions of that fee back.
Yeah.
Usually a time limit.
Yeah, and then there's always a time limit just for administrative.
Right.
So they spend $100,000 to get it to their development. They get some portion of the connection fees along that pipe. Now, it's never been that if you connect to that pipe and then have another extension, that's off limits. It's only the people along that pipe. But there's
One potential risk to that, as it's played out over the system over several decades or decades more, is that you then could have pockets where the connection fees, for whatever reason, because of high cost, are unobtainable. So you might have, hey, in this one pocket on half, this $45,000 connection. Well, we had a big 12 to 8 subsidizing this cost recovery. So developers potential walk away from it.
Sure.
That's one of those risks that, as you try to get exact cost to exact places, that you may create these dark zones of development.
Sure.
Throughout your system.
Yeah.
Which would necessarily penalize it.
Yeah.
The point here is that in time, the goal is to attract more customers, great ways.
Yep. And that's, and to your point, the benefit to the people who live in Oshkosh here is that over time, there's going to be another 1,500 people connected to the system paying rates to help pay for the system.
Right.
Right, I like your comment though that says they get a permit for 12 inches, but the cost is for 12 inches. So this would be the precedent, I would think, if you say, nope, you only need 8, right? Or does that make sense what I'm saying? Or
You're discerning whether that long-standing policy of
the
the
upside?
8-inch need versus the 12-inch requirement, whether who pays for that upside?
Yeah, I mean,
stands,
yeah, so in the contract
or
it says
it's difficult.
you recoup the cost. What is the cost? Is the cost is for 8-inch, they're paying, obviously, and for 12-inch, you're paying, but you're saying we won't do it unless you do 12, so. What is the cost?
I don't understand.
The cost is the incremental difference.
Yeah, but I mean, so it says this group determines who recoups the cost. Cost,
So you're saying should the developer pay for all 12? Is that what
perhaps.
that's what I heard you ask.
I mean, this says they recoup the cost. You're saying I won't put it in unless you put it in 12.
That's contrary to our policies, not our policies, city policies in terms of
In the past.
expanding the system. Yeah, everything's on the table.
Yeah, no, so I'm just saying, this is what this thing says. What are the costs? You put an 8-inch in there, and then in 2 years, you gotta run another 8-inch down the next road, right? To service that next area or whatever. So I understand. But anyways, the contract says we have a say in the recouping of the costs.
This isn't a lot different than the fact that as the system grows, the system pays for more wells, more towers, booster stations,
Sure.
because that helps supply the water. The larger pipe supplies
Sure.
more water.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you could take it to another extreme and say, these guys need a 12-inch pipe. Well, obviously, we need more capacity. And so they need to pay for part of that. Or, you know what I mean? So I don't know if we want to. Oh,
We're not going to do that today anyway, because that's part of this connection fee.
Yeah,
And
right.
extension fee, models. We need something.
Quick question. So what's the timeline on this particular development? When are they hoping? They plan to start digging?
They're already gonna do the 12 inch.
yeah.
So it's,
I think they're moving forward. There's equipment out there. They're tree clearing. They're moving a little bit of dirt. But I don't really know. I mean, I suppose if we said, EPC says, no, you got to pay for it all, they could pull up stakes and walk away. But I have not had that conversation.
This is like a $50 million development or something. So in some ways, this $500,000 is not like it makes a break on them either. Interesting conversation.
So
it's a big number. It's a big number.
yeah. And I could be wrong on this. It might be only 350 or 400. Still, it's
This is one that the county millage money just got allocated to chip in on for, yeah.
How is it, are they using county housing millage for this?
There's some small amount, I mean, relative to full cost.
I was wondering, is it a Mishka or?
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it's huge.
So,
80 to 100.
so I'm suggesting, based on conversation, and I don't want to get to the weeds on the whole connection fee issue, but maintaining the policy of the system paying for oversizing the pipe when it's needed. That what we do is we move forward, and I can help James and his staff work with the developer to come to an agreement on the number and the payback agreement, however that works in terms of your budget timing. And then we bring those specifics back to this board in June so that we can actually make final decision. But that would be, I mean, we're sort of having a consensus here that we're going to continue this policy. And as I've been working through the bigger policy, that continues to be part of it, because that's worked well for the system for my entire career.
Of oversizing when it makes sense. Which it does make sense.
Yeah, because if you didn't oversize in the system,
Yeah.
the townships wouldn't have water.
For the past, the sewer, the township should pay for the oversight.
Yeah, 'cause it's
If
your
the city
asset.
paid for the oversight. That's the difference.
And we're not hearing of the 100, we're not hearing about the 100-foot extension. This is just such a giant one.
It's just, this is a highly unusual.
Okay.
Who knows? I guess you'll have to live in Arizona anymore. Maybe we'll have tons of these 700 development projects, right? Up around here.
Anything else? Go on to wellhead protection plan.
Update? No, we let somebody farm around.
Yeah, we don't
our well
have,
fields.
we are still working on the wellhead protection, ordinance specifically. We just had 2 farm leases that went to city commission, one in Osmo, that's our, station 38, the corner of 6th and G Avenue. That is now going to be farmed. That's very positive. And then, over 120 acres of Comstock at our station 45 property. It's also going to be farmed. And so for both of those agreements, we took our city Kalamazoo wellhead, wellhead protection ordinance, and all the regulations in that, and created farm protection ordinances. So, we actually looked through city commission minutes, or the packet for all field that we did, station 25, the Comstock Township one. There's a city ordinance and a map, which stops the city limits, shows the overlays, and then there's this agreement for Comstock Township, and it really just our way to demonstrate that we're following the city wellhead protection ordinance out in the township. So we'll continue to do that same method until we get all those ordinances up for all areas. So that work does continue.
So that's all good. We can use our city ordinance and just apply that no matter where it is. Or do we need to have some more general agreement on this board about?
So one of the things in the contract was that that all the townships will develop and implement protection. So that's that work was in process. So yeah, the city can't by ordinance regulate.
Sure, yeah.
Ours is going to require conversion to municipal sewer after 15 years of septic. I'm just.
That would be very popular.
As a good model is Texas Township. 5 years ago, they basically took the wellhead protection performance standards from the city and wrote an ordinance that's very close to the cities, just basically swapped it out because they, and so they've got a wellhead protection ordinance that has performance standards that mimic the city council, so it's very close to the city council. It references wellhead protection areas that you developed through your work. And I think that what the other townships understand, to the extent that they don't have wellhead protection ordinances, you might, but others don't. I don't know if you do. Anyway, is to follow the same model because they're good performance standards. It's really mostly some use restrictions. You can't have a scrap yard like or chemical facility, and a lot of it is stormwater protection.
There is a lot of stormwater components to it. So,
Yeah.
Some of these townships don't have road agencies or stormwater programs, so it's a little bit of a process.
So the idea was you're in the process of finalizing your wellhead protection ordinance and performance standards.
Correct.
That's close, I think.
Right. And some of why it's taking so long is that we've gone through with some work, we're retracing our wellhead over the factories on 1 year, 5 year, 10 year. And those are doing some modeling from out from the state of Michigan and some those areas are changing. The polygons are somewhat different, so we got to make sure that those are accurate and correct. So we've got to work through that.
And those will be available in a few months or something? The map, let's say?
We are working on the map right now.
Okay.
So the thought was, because we've seen success in Texas Township with that model, as soon as that's finalized, take that and do the same thing in the townships. That way their developers have the same performance standards that they have to follow basically in the county for wellhead protection. And then Oshawa doesn't have to do their own, which is going to end up being probably 95% of the same thing they've got. So there's consistency and there's
Helpful. Okay, committee member, let's see, I'll start with guest comments. Anyone? Mark Elliott?
Yeah, I guess I have some general comments. Number one, great discussion on the upsizing challenge. I totally agree and support the direction the committee's moving. I might gently kind of disagree with Mr. Wheat in that I don't think this is an exception necessarily, if only because of its size with respect to the extension. That we have those questions all of the time. I'm encouraged that apparently the city in Baker thinks that you can enter into a payback agreement with the developer here. I think we also constrained that because it's annually a smaller amount, maybe we feel we can work that out. That's encouraging. I support that. As discussed before, Township of Oshawa does have water extensions that have been delayed because of the sewer project lawsuit, but we're getting to the point to move quickly on those. I don't know if they're in your CIP yet. I don't think they are, but perhaps payback agreements are appropriate for there. I do think that you have some sort of payback for the oversizing for our emergency KL landfill related groundwater project. So again, kudos for the city and the UPC. I think you're great. Thank you so much. With respect to the wellhead protection, again, it's a wonderful program. I was involved in the early stages, and my only suggestion is if you could open up the development of it, get some feedback participation with some of the surrounding communities. I think that will help ownership of the ordinance changes that they'll be asked to make. If you do that on an earlier basis rather than present this city completed now and put it on. So great. I'll encourage you guys. This is really exciting stuff.
From an engineer.
Nerds in the world tonight.
Tim?
What Mark said, I think I'll say that oversizing, I was what, seems like a big deal. We were doing a contract 30 years ago, and a lot of times the city would say, yeah, great, appreciate, suggestion, we want to oversize it. Other times the city say, hey, what close this new, 58, we're going to upsize it. So it's going on a lot, and sometimes there's no reason for this. It's a risky little development. Have the developer pay for it, we would pay back. Keep it through city viewpoint. So that's happened a lot as far. So I know it sounds like a lot here, but it's just normal. How we decide these paybacks is probably what bigger concern should be. But they have to be built. We don't want to go back and tear it out. We've done that. Done extensions, but we planned that oversize. And go back and play sometimes only a few hundred feet. And that changed all this over crazy. And then I don't know, Tom, if this is already in the city's are in the village master plan as, it's not, so it doesn't mean right now. It's not in the land use plan as,
It's zoned for it?
no, not so, but in the land use plan classification, is it a residential classification?
Oh, yeah,
Because that would meet the standard. I realize we have to have the updated standards by 2023, but I think a lot of colleges have a lot of work already done.
yeah, yep.
So that just a couple observations. And as far as wellhead protection, I know Comstock did that back on their office. So they have to be tweaked and updated, changes. I like it. But they're there, they just need changes to be made. I think that's right.
Thank you.
Darwell's.
Jeff, anything?
Just want to reiterate what Mark and Tim said. I mean, the upsizing is a necessary evil because if you don't upsize, you're going to have to run a whole new pipe. It's going to cost you quite much more. Serve an area, what do you call it? Long now. It makes sense. Thank you all. Great discussion. Sorry.
James?
No further comment?
Okay. Any, anyone virtually wanting to make a comment? Raise your hand in the participant column if so. And in the meantime, we'll continue with board comments, anything?
The only comment I'll have is you asked about, do they have the pipe? You know, we're seeing ductile iron pipe, which is basically an off-the-shelf type of construction. Material is 30 to 35, 40 weeks out. That was as of maybe 3 weeks ago. Maybe it's longer now. So that's us in the construction industry are having to navigate that. I'm sure that.
Yeah, it plays in the schedule.
John?
I'm good. No?
Good?
I'll
Jim?
second.
David? I'm good too. Thank you. We've exhausted our agenda. Our next meeting is June 9th. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you.
The infrastructure conference with Brad.